Good evening. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I just want to give a little brief overview of the idea of One Health. This is a new program at the Department of Agriculture that we oversee the New Jersey One Health Task Force, which is a legislated group, the first one in the country to be created with legislation, and it brings together veterinarians, doctors, and environmental health specialists all together to work on improving the health of New Jersey residents, plants, animals, and ecosystems. So Agatha, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. What is One Health? It's basically a concept recognizing that human health, animal health, and environmental health are interconnected, and that we need to work together across sectors and spatial scales and disciplines to address these issues that spill over from one realm into another. Next slide. And just to give a quick example of why we're talking about it right now, One Health issues include, among other things, vector-borne zoonotic diseases like avian influenza, which affect animals and people, antimicrobial resistance, which is another big one that affects animals and people and can be found in the environment as well, and a bunch of other issues that all benefit from One Health coordination, meaning cross-sector and cross-discipline coordination to address them. Next slide. The New Jersey One Health Task Force was established with legislation, as I mentioned. It's got representatives from the Departments of Agriculture, Health, and Environmental Protection, as well as 10 appointed public members in a number of different fields. And their goals and their strategic plan was released in May of this year, which includes strengthening coordination and collaboration, encouraging industry and academic research, workforce development, and increasing public awareness of One Health, and ensuring improving data sharing across agencies and ensuring One Health sustainability. Next slide. So our website is onehealth.nj.gov, and the next One Health Task Force meeting will be September 26th of this year. It's a public meeting, so anyone is welcome to join. You can join on Teams. We also have a listserv that you can scan this code here and join the One Health Connect listserv to stay up to date on One Health updates from the task force and news and interest in New Jersey, as well as it can be used to establish interdisciplinary collaborations. So thank you for joining us to learn about how to keep poultry healthy in New Jersey. And I'm going to turn it over now to one of our veterinarians at the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Christopher Smith, and he's going to talk about diseases and pathogens of poultry.
All right, does that look good?
Looks great.
All right, so thank you for coming and listening to our presentations tonight. My name is Dr. Chris Smith. I'm a veterinary diagnostician here at the New Jersey Animal Health Diagnostic Laboratory, or NJAHDL. As the state lab, we provide services to support disease control, health, and productivity initiatives of horses, ruminants, poultry, fish, even wildlife. We provide cost-effective necropsy and diagnostic services for companion animals like dogs and cats, as well as exotic animals like parrots and reptiles. One of our many functions is to assist veterinarians across the state with advanced diagnostics. And our sections include pathology, molecular diagnostics, serology, virology, and bacteriology. Through the collaboration between these lab sections, we're able to provide testing for many reportable and economically significant diseases. We're located on the state police headquarters here in Ewing, New Jersey. I primarily work in the pathology section here. Our section conducts necropsies, surgical biopsies for veterinarians, and fecal flotations. A little plug for our pathology service. We offer $75 necropsies for up to 2 poultry at a time. With that, you get a necropsy, you get full histopathology, where we look at the tissues under the microscope, fecal flotation up to 2 bacterial and or fungal cultures, and it includes lab disposal if that is what you choose. And we are open for 24/7 submission drop-off. You may be asking, what is a necropsy and why would you want it? A necropsy is defined as the post-mortem examination of an animal's body, or more simply, an autopsy for animals. There are a lot of benefits that can come from a necropsy, such as more in-depth visual assessment and better sample collection. Results can give us information of epidemiological significance, and also it gives owners some peace of mind knowing the ultimate cause of their animal's death. So without further ado, let's dive into kind of the purpose of this presentation, which is I'm going to go over what we see on a daily basis at the lab. I have compiled all the chicken cases from 2022 to 2025 and gone over the primary cause of death or debilitation of those chickens. We see a lot more than just chickens. We see turkeys, emus, ducks, you name it, we see it. But just for simplicity, and because most of what we get are chickens, I will kind of only include chickens in this presentation. So we'll start with the largest percentage of diagnoses that we get is neoplastic diseases. Neoplasia is the uncontrolled proliferation of cells, often referred to as tumors or cancer. And that is the rapidly multiplying cells can disrupt normal organ function. Some are caused by viruses, and some and can be spread. They often require advanced diagnostics to differentiate. You can't usually tell them apart just by looking at them, basically. And those make up 30% or almost 1/3 of all the chicken cases that we see at the lab. And those are Merrick's disease, lymphoid leukosis, or adenocarcinoma. Just because they do make up such a large portion of what we see, I'll kind of give a small overview of each one of them. Merrick's disease is caused by herpes virus, and we see that in mostly younger birds before they come into lay at around 16 weeks, and it causes T-cell lymphoma, which causes some lumps in the organs, some organomegaly or organ enlargement, and often affects the nervous tissue. So here we have a picture of a sciatic nerve, and many of those little purple dots in there are lymphoid cells that have kind of invaded because of that virus in the bird. This is spread horizontally or from bird to bird through feather dander, and there is no vertical spread. So it does not spread through the egg to offspring. They do not get it until they come out of the egg, basically. And that is considered ubiquitous. So if you're asking yourself, does my flock or has my flock been exposed to this? The answer is most likely yes. And vaccines are available, but they need to be given the vaccine before they're exposed naturally to the virus, which would have to be on day 1. Lymphoid leukosis caused by retrovirus. It affects older birds, and that's a B-cell lymphoma. It shows many of the same signs as or lesions as Merrick's disease, but it does not affect nervous tissue. So that's usually one of the best ways to kind of differentiate the two, but it requires histopathology. And this is vertical and horizontal transmission, so it can spread to offspring or bird to bird. And there's no commercial vaccine for lymphoid leukosis. Adenocarcinoma, not known to be caused by a virus, but it is seen in much older birds around 2 years of age, and it originates from the ovary, oviduct, or pancreas. And it causes nodules all over the primary organ, and then it can spread to other organs as well. It's also seen in association with ascites or water belly. Moving on to infectious causes. Infectious causes are the second most common diagnosis for us, with bacterial infections being the majority of those cases. Oviduct impactions are not by definition infectious, but almost every single one that we see is associated with a salpingitis or an infection of the oviduct by bacteria for the most part. So I kind of included that in there. A much smaller slice of the pie was viral and fungal in origin. Of the bacteria that we see as the cause of death in chickens, E. coli is by far the most common. E. coli is present in the intestines of all chickens and can cause infections when a bird is immunocompromised due to age, stress, or concurrent disease. There are a few other bacteria that we have isolated, some of which are significant to human health. So please, I'm begging you, do not kiss your chickens. Of the fungal diseases that we have seen, the most common is aspergillosis, and the viruses that we have seen are infectious laryngotracheitis, which is a herpes virus, and infectious bronchitis, which is a coronavirus. We often do not see avian influenza because our field staff do such a good job of controlling that. Moving on to husbandry-related causes of death, we have starvation, nutrient deficiency, dehydration, physical trauma, freezing, overheating, overcrowding, and cannibalism. I included cannibalism in husbandry just because it is often related to one of the above causes. 9% of the diagnoses that we have are due to intestinal parasites, including roundworms, coccidia, capillaria, and tapeworms. And I kind of broke those out into all the cases that we've had and what those cases had. Of the chickens we've seen at the lab, 36% were not found to have any parasites whatsoever. The math whizzes among you may notice that this graph does not add up to 100%, and that is because 33% of the chickens that were affected by intestinal parasites had more than one type of intestinal parasite. While we are on the subject of parasites, external parasites are less commonly a primary cause of death, but they can affect production and welfare of your birds. Lice, seen here on the bird, live on the bird, so they can often be seen if you part the feathers. Northern fowl mites, fairly common, are found near the cloaca and can spread disease from bird to bird, and they can even bite humans. Scaly leg mites cause proliferation of the skin there on the legs. And the worst of all, in my opinion, but thankfully probably the least common in New Jersey of the ectoparasites that we see here, they are the bed bug, which is the exact same bug that affects humans. So you can spread it to the bug or to the bird, and they can spread it back to you. And if you've ever lived with bed bugs, you know it is very difficult to get rid of them, and it is just as difficult to get them out of a coop. So other causes of death include predation by mink, raptors, and foxes. Toxicity that we see is not common, but almost always zinc toxicity from leaving galvanized metals around the yard after a construction project or something. Just make sure to clean up all those because chickens will eat them. We see gout and crop impactions as well, and those are included in other just because there are so many different causes of crop impactions and gout that it could be its own lecture on just each of those diseases. And congenital abnormalities are also seen usually in younger birds. So 7% of the deaths that we see are caused by fatty liver hemorrhagic disease. It's also called hepatic lipidosis with hemorrhage. And that is when a copious amount of fat gets stored in the liver. And the liver basically becomes very fragile and can break open, and the bird bleeds out into their coelomic cavity. The exact cause is unknown, but it is definitely associated with excess energy intake. Many of the birds with this are very overconditioned, and usually it's due to high-fat snacks or too much scratch grains. And we have a histopathological slide there with all those little white circles. Those are where fat droplets used to be. Unknown causes are, I'm proud to say that only about 5% of the causes of death that come in are kind of deemed unknown. Usually that's because there's no lesions that can be observed. Sometimes antibiotic treatment prior to death can kind of hinder our bacteriological cultures. If you've killed everything with antibiotics, we can't grow it. And severe autolysis, or basically rotten chickens being brought in, we can't really tell what's from the rotting or what's from the actual disease. And then kind of the biggest one I think that hinders us is an incomplete history. So we give you a bunch of space on our submission form, kind of highlighted there in yellow. Just make sure to use it, put as much information as you possibly can on there, and that really gives us a lot of help to be able to get you some answers. So you may be asking yourself what you can do as an owner. And as Dr. Strelick will tell you, biosecurity is vitally important to flock health. So I put it on there 3 times for you to read. Benjamin Franklin once said that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and he wanted to make turkeys the national bird, so I trust him. I think he's one of us. Disease exclusion, keeping a clean environment and preventing disease as best as we can make your flock healthy and productive. And some specific things I always recommend is to observe your birds and watch for changes in behavior, feed and water intake, and production. And you should also be handling your birds and feel the breast muscle. I've got kind of a little infographic there. You want them in that well-conditioned range for layer chickens mostly, not quite for broiler birds. You would want them, you actually don't want to use this at all for broiler birds. But you want to feel their belly for any signs of water belly, and inspect their feathers and their skin for the picture there is some lice eggs. But if you see any problems, you contact a veterinarian. They're always there to help. And if you ever need to use our services, we're always here. So that's it for me. Thanks so much for having me tonight, and it was a pleasure speaking to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. That was really interesting. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Strelick, and you can just save the questions for the end. And if you have anything you would like to ask either of the speakers, put them in the Q&A, and we'll call on you once we're done. So Dr. Strelick is now going to speak about protecting your birds.
Okay, I wanted to make sure to unmute myself. That always helps. Thanks so much, Dr. GZ. So great introduction from Dr. Smith about the commonly seen ailments from poultry here in New Jersey. And for the next few minutes of the time here that we have together, I'll walk everyone through really basic introductory information regarding some of the husbandry or keeping practices, typically for a backyard flock that we might see, and keeping those in mind, integrating ideas for disease prevention so that some of those items seen on that chart Dr. Smith provided, we can try to avoid, and keeping top of mind biosecurity. I'll only say that once right now, though. So that you kind of have the gears in mind about really who we are in the department itself. The Division of Animal Health it works very closely with livestock and poultry owners. We are entrusted within the department to ensure that we're running programs to watch for the incursion of any diseases that could impact animal health. We are responsible for control of disease, safeguarding the well-being of livestock within the state. A handful of those ideas are within our regulations. I have them listed here on this slide, all available on our website. This does include humane standards for minimum care for livestock and poultry, which we'll hit on in the next slide. And part of the role we have within the division as well is to go through the motions of planning out, heaven forbid, we have a reportable disease detected in our state, that there's an emergency plan in place. On the flip side of that, as far as emergency planning, also natural disaster like a major hurricane come through, making sure folks who have farms keep that in mind for planning in the face of a disaster. What would you do, with your pets, with your livestock, with your poultry, if you needed to evacuate, or if you knew a storm with potential flooding was coming your way. So these are all the sorts of activities that keep us very, very busy within the division. And I wanted to make sure everyone here had an understanding of that, the basic motto and goals within the division. Our website there at the bottom has plenty more information, and I have a few more links for you guys to follow throughout the slides. As I just mentioned, we do have humane standards. So those are in fact state regulations or sort of the basic rules and the minimum care and treatment for poultry and livestock species in New Jersey. The way I like to remark on it is it's food, water, shelter. And if the animal needs medical care, are they receiving it? Certainly there's more involved, but that's sort of the basics of it. When it comes to poultry and sort of husbandry and their housing, we want to ensure, as it specifically states in those regulations, that your poultry, however they're housed, have sufficient room. And what that means, they need to be able to stand up, sort of fully upright, and lie down, spread their wings, move their head around, be able to turn, and rest comfortably. So no matter if they're in a cage housing, open style floor housing, those are the basics that they need to be able to have the ability to have free range of movement. If they're you're using nesting boxes, they should be in sufficient quantity for the amount of laying hens that you have. And for no matter what type of housing is being offered for the poultry, bottom line is environment needs to be supporting their health. So you may already be thinking of what could that mean? Really cleanliness, monitoring for ill birds and trying to get to the root cause in a quick fashion, ensuring that there's good ventilation, and providing for the birds for their needs. We'll go through some specifics through that throughout the rest of the slides here. Before we completely walk away from housing, though, for poultry, knowing that a lot of the group here has backyard, more residential, potentially a setting for their poultry, what are some of the key things to think of about how you're keeping your birds? Really basics, keep your chickens in, keep the predators out. There's a few key factors there that we'll hit on too. I've mentioned the good ventilation. That is in fact part of our humane standard too. So making sure that if they're in a coop and they're fully indoors all the time, they must have good ventilation. Their feeding and watering systems, do you have access to them so that you can refill them as needed, clean them as needed? You'd be surprised some of the situations we find ourselves where it's obvious that may not be as easy to get to. So really, how frequently are they being refilled? And then access for the caretaker, right? How easy is it for you to get in and out of, so that you can assess the birds, provide their food and water, clean their ground up, etc. Thinking about drainage too. So if things spill, if there's a rain, they cannot be standing on wet ground 24/7 all the time. Do you need to be able to move the housing structure from time to time? Things of that nature. Already said it, we're keeping chickens in and predators out, or even really any kind of wildlife. So wild birds, major, we want to keep out, and that includes any sort of secretion from wild birds. So potentially even the feces from wild birds. And you might be guessing why is because that can spread disease to your domestic poultry. Really any other kind of wild mammal too. So particularly small mammals like rodents we want to keep away from our birds. So it's keeping that in mind too about how you're keeping or housing your poultry. How can you make it so that there's less likely for any kind of wild mammal or wild bird to access your poultry? Are you just inviting areas where wild birds can roost, find nesting sites? I'm sure you've seen, all sorts of the different available products, or even something you can make on your own to deter and or create barriers so that wild birds may not find themselves a nice place to set up shop right where your birds are. There's a variety of different kinds of netting, the wire mesh, that really you need to ensure it's secure, it's tight around the edges where it needs to be, and keeping an eye for any kind of tears that may need to be repaired. Keeping, some of those need to be pretty tight for small birds in particular that can squeeze through. So 10 to 12 gauge mesh with 1-inch openings will exclude most wild bird species. Just install it properly, keep it maintained, and or use other kinds of exclusion netting. I'll give you a few examples in a slide afterwards, just so you can kind of see some things that you might want to assess in your own property. Nice checklist here from our partners over at USDA. Things to keep in mind, very general for, what could you look at around, your farm? Where would wild animals, come from? What would be attracting them? And how could you, remove some of those things or sort of manage those areas so that, wild mammals may be less likely to want to come on your property. Reducing attractants like food, whether, it's you're naturally growing things like fruit trees, or the grain, or the poultry feed that you're keeping on property just to feed your own animals. Keeping things mowed well, so it's not too much brush, encouraging wild animals to set up shop, and storing waste, any deads or the carcasses of your domestic poultry in covered containers, disposed of appropriately. We'll get into the equipment of vehicles or anything else you're driving around on the property, but those are items you want to keep in mind about ability to kind of spread around potential transmission of diseases. So as promised, here's some images, really obvious kinds of, this is something that may need to be addressed in a different way. So, a hole on the side of a barn would be immediate repair. Don't let this sit like that for year after year, because you're just inviting wild animals to come in. If that's where you're storing, even your feed, good way to contaminate it. If you've got your domestic poultry in there, that's a way to spread disease. So repairing any gaps or holes within the structures that your birds live in. The wire mesh we've mentioned, just monitoring, get it on your calendar, twice a year, some kind of routine where you're going to do a walkthrough and assess, what part of the structure needs to be repaired. Everything looking good, great. We mentioned anything any kind of waste or potential carcasses that are being accumulated. They need to be kept in an area away from your lives and covered. This image here on the bottom left is just a great way to attract all sorts of wild birds and other kinds of wildlife. Watch as you're doing your walkthrough for areas where nests might be getting built or other areas where wild birds may perch, and try to identify ways in which to deter that activity. Standing water is a big thing. So watch your property, see where standing water is more likely to accrue, and identify ways to mitigate that, because that will be a great invitation for wild birds like waterfowl, geese, and ducks to come and hang out. Same thing goes with small lakes or ponds that might be on your property. You may find that you're getting some migratory waterfowl show up every so often. You want to mitigate that and reduce that possibility. At minimum, ensure that those spaces are not being shared with your domestic poultry. Last thing you want is your owned domestic ducks to be in the same little pond as the wild waterfowl. That shared space could be a way for disease transmission. We mentioned food already. Just thinking about the area where you're keeping your scratch, your grains, your feed that you're using to provide to your domestic poultry or other livestock you may have on farm. Keep the area clean. Use the broom, sweep every now and then, so that there isn't areas where there's just scattered feed around the ground. It's a great way to attract things like mice and rats, other wild or wild birds. Don't feed straight on the ground, feed in feeders, so that it can be cleaned routinely and kept kind of in a few separate areas. And then the picture here on the top right, that's one of many varieties of different wild bird deterrents. These can be used sort of usually typically need to be moved around in different areas in the property, just because wild birds may become accustomed to them. But you may have seen all sorts of variety of crazy ways folks have come up with to deter wild birds from landing on their property. But that's just an example of one. And certainly there are plenty of ideas out there. We partnered often with USDA Wildlife Services. There are a handful of folks in our state that, even you can make a phone call and express what's going on your property, and they can walk you through some ideas, or potentially even come out on your property and give you some pointers and point you in the right direction for resources to try to deter wild birds or other wild animals coming on your property. I'll have their number there towards the end of my slides, so don't forget about that. So, as promised, biosecurity is the name of the game. We'll chat through a handful of different approaches and some of the basics for hopefully practical adjustments you may be able to do on farm, starting tomorrow. Potentially you're already doing some of this now, which is wonderful. But just so we all are starting off on the same page, biosecurity, easiest way to sort of think about it are, activities, procedures, practices, just stuff that you're doing on your property intended to protect yourself, your family, and then your animals, against disease or any harmful germ agent, something that could cause disease to you, or like I said, the animals on your property. These agents, these germs or pathogens, they can spread quickly, and it can even be through something like you walked through an area where your birds live, they free range or they defecate, and you've grabbed a little bit of their feces on the bottom of your boots, and then you walked into your house, or then you walked into the shop with those same boots, and just think about how that could just cause some sort of disease spread. Different kinds of equipment that you might be using and not cleaning so much in between, or you're using on your farm and then you're letting your neighbor who has birds as well share, and you haven't cleaned it in between. That's a big no-no. Vehicles, again, we'll go through some specifics of what you can do about vehicles, and then anything you're wearing. So you may want to even have dedicated like an outer layer when you're handling or taking care of your birds. So just think about any kind of extra step you may be able to take when you're handling your animals, just to ensure that you have that layer of defense against any potential spread of disease. Some concepts to kind of think about, and it could be either something to activate on your farm, or if you're going to your friend's farm or somebody else's farm, and just keep in the back of your brain. You know, is there someone here on property that you should check in with before you just kind of walk around and show yourself around, tour around a bit? Maybe there's a farm manager or an office that you should be going in and log in and see, you know, are there any protocols we need to follow? Do they have farm specific boots they want you to toss on quick before you go over, you know, for the visit? So that's something that you'd want to keep in mind, and something you could potentially implement yourself at your farm. So boots are a great first step for farm specific personal protective equipment, or PPE. Another example would be cloth coveralls that you could throw in the laundry. Gloves. So that's particular too if you're handling animals, or really important if you've got a sick animal that you've now isolated from the rest of your flock. You're of course going to handle that one last. You know, at the end of the day, after taking care of everybody else, wear gloves. That's a good barrier there to keep in mind for your own safety. Disinfecting equipment and vehicles. And then limiting access of animal housing areas. So if you've got friends over for the bonfire, you know, they don't need to be going over and you know, chasing the birds around for fun. So keep them out of their animal areas unnecessary when they're in there unnecessarily. Any organic material, I've mentioned the feces, you know, anything from the birds, they don't need to be coming off the farm. Keeping all your waste material, etc., covered properly and disposed of properly. Some folks, particularly with birds who are doing meat birds, kind of are familiar with like an all-in, all-out management style. So that would be where you're really just purchasing, you know, one lot of birds. You know, they're going into a specific housing area. They're all leaving at the same time, and then that allows you to do a nice, good, thorough clean and disinfection of that housing area. Let it sit for a bit, and then bring in your next load. So that's sort of an example of what we're speaking of for an all-in, all-out. That's an idea that, you know, depending what your operation is, that's a possibility to consider. I think we've talked enough about preventing contact with wild birds. The big thing is water sources too. Also, if you've got free range poultry in your backyard, think about, you know, when they're out and about, you know, wild birds can land anytime. So, you know, you don't want the waterers, you don't want the feeders, anything that might attract the wild birds to come out and sort of commingle, hang out with your domestic birds. You don't want that, you know, out and about. So just little tweaks that you can do to discourage wild birds coming on, landing on your property, and getting into close contact with your domestics. Where's your poultry coming from when you do buy them? Great. If you can tell me that, yep, they're from an NPIP flock. Some of you are maybe familiar with that term, but, you know, flock that's been tested for avian influenza, Plorum, you know, got some paperwork behind it. That's really good. So, you know, they're coming from somewhere that, you know, there's been some sort of tester involved, potentially a state representative like myself, who's been out, done some testing, and we know there's some level of disease status known, flock health status known about those birds. I've hit on this once, but just want to really make it clear that if you do find you have a bird that becomes sick, isolate it, remove it from the rest of the flock while you're caring for it. And then when you need to go out and take care of your flock, feed, water, take a look at them, do that with your healthy flock first. And then then go over and take care of your sick bird, so that, heaven forbid, it's sick with something that could be transmitted to your healthy birds. You don't go handle your sick bird and then touch one of your healthy birds and spread it to it inadvertently. Sick birds too, you want to call us, but we'll talk about that in just a minute or two. Don't share equipment. I've mentioned that. Cleaning, disinfection, we really mean it. It has to be a certain protocol. It doesn't mean just spray some Lysol and walk away. If you've got a pitchfork and it has some dried on mud and manure, it must first be cleaned. What that means is good old-fashioned soap and elbow grease, and rub it off and make sure that dirt and manure is off, that piece of equipment first. Rinse it off, let it dry, and then go ahead and apply whatever disinfectant you're using. Let it sit for a certain amount of contact time per the manufacturer's instructions, and then rinse it off and let it dry. So whenever you hear any of us say C and D, or cleaning and disinfection, those are the steps that we truly mean. So just sort of keep that in mind, and that really must be a part of your biosecurity protocol within your farm. What disinfectant might you use? I do recommend that there's this QR code for a website through Iowa State, walks you through a handful of different disinfectants. The one here, a few here are pulled from that site. I'll just mention, that some off the shelf may not be as effective. So I've mentioned like that Lysol does not work well if organic materials present. Good old-fashioned though, household bleach. I'll jump to a half a cup in a gallon. Works just fine. And there's a couple links there too. So we may want to consider what we're trying to disinfect against. However, you can certainly consult with that website through Iowa State. Call us. It may be something that we're there helping you out already, or for routine purposes, half a cup of bleach in per gallon, and that'd be your standard sort of household bleach. Okay, vehicle biosecurity, as promised. I just want to make sure everyone gets the point of, you don't need to drive your truck every little nook and cranny of your farm, or the gator, or whatever you have, whatever kind of motorized vehicle you've got that you're driving around on the farm, because it's a great way to kind of spread disease. If you can park on something paved, it's going to be easier to clean your tires and your undercarriage that way. It's not going to get all the mud and guck on your inside your tires and in the undercarriage. If you've got visitors, keep them on your driveway. Same thing, unless they absolutely have to come through your farm. They really shouldn't be. These nice lawn sprayers, here the image here on the bottom right, work wonderfully for packing in spray disinfectant after a thorough cleaning of the undercarriage and tires of vehicles. Keep that in mind too if you're transporting animals. Areas within the truck that maybe needs to be cleaned. So if they're in the bed of the truck, or because you're using poultry crates to take them somewhere, or clean the inside of the bed of that truck too. Just some things to think about that, in our everyday lives, it may not have always occurred to us. Different designated access points on your property, depending on where you have your gates, different areas where different species may be. You may want to throw up some signs to say, hey, visitor, you can't go any further, without someone's permission. There's all sorts of different kinds of signs out there that you can get to suit your needs. There are a handful available on our website. There's just a couple examples, just, saying, hey, we're trying to keep our farm healthy and secure. Please come see us at the front office. You could write a little note. Please call me. Let me know why you're here, so that we don't have, just sort of unrestricted access to our farm. We're getting there. We're almost through. I mentioned a little bit about animal movement, if you're transporting your birds or potentially, other animals that you may have on farm. Just sort of keep those concepts in concepts of biosecurity in mind. Just like that, just in the same vein when you're considering moving animals around. Not only, in a conveyance, so within a trailer in your truck, but also within your property as well. Don't want to share equipment between animals or between different farms, or if you must, do that thorough cleaning and disinfection protocol. Something folks may not think of too much is even when filling water buckets, don't let the very end of the hose sit inside, the bucket, because there could be some germ that could be transmitted between animal to animal that way if you do. And just some of those do's and don'ts of, use your own equipment, because then your own herd or flock's disease status. If you must share, clean and disinfect in between. And then we've mentioned too, wearing gloves is going to be one of your first lines of defense just to protect yourself and the other animals that you're handling. USDA has a website. I have a link for it towards the end. It's called Defend Your Flock. Lots of information on there. You could really go crazy learning a lot about different ways to ensure, you're keeping your backyard flock safe. Here's just a checklist I completely stole from USDA's site there, but I thought it was a nice sort of rundown and summary of some things to sort of keep in mind for from the biosecurity scope for backyard flocks. Isolating your birds, keeping things clean to prevent disease, keeping all those different kinds of equipment, including the shoes you wear, in mind for your biosecurity protocol. Thinking about the vehicles that are coming on the farm, the cages you're using for poultry movement. Don't borrow from your neighbor, and keeping an eye out for sick birds, and then reporting them to us. We'll talk through that. Consequences. So listen, if something comes up, and you don't really, you're not sure, how to respond, make sure that you give us a call. Anything can happen, even if you read the textbook and do everything right. But unfortunately, when a reportable disease comes through, it can come through with economic losses for the farmer, and certain quarantines or even trade restrictions. Some diseases we know can affect poultry, can also affect humans. So we want to ensure that everyone's being astute with biosecurity on farm. Something to keep in mind is avian influenza, or as we all have been aware since 2022, highly pathogenic avian influenza has been, an outbreak has been occurring in our country for that time frame, and we continue to see cases in wild birds and in domestic birds. And this graphic kind of shows you sort of this intertwined system of how any disease, but as avian influenza can be an example of, may spread within the poultry industry. And you play a role in ensuring the safety of your own birds and the poultry industry in the state. I did want to mention that the state does do routine testing for avian influenza a variety of different ways, including backyard flocks. We do field sick bird and flock testing. So if you call our office, one of our technicians or veterinarians will come out to your property if it's a large enough mortality or morbidity. We do offer testing typically under a grant, will depend, so that we can rule out the disease. Occasionally, it may be where if you've got maybe like one dead poultry or just a few, we'll recommend necropsy, which Dr. Smith mentioned, and we'll set you up to get that submitted to the lab, and get more bang for your buck with information for maybe the cause of death. But we really want to ensure folks know, please call our office. You'll speak to someone like myself or one of my colleagues, walk through what's going on, decide, hey, should one of us kind of go out take a peek at what's going on, collect some samples to rule out avian influenza. And then at least, we can kind of have an idea what's your management looking like, and potentially walk you through some ideas that might help things get you through sort of that rough patch. If anyone does see any wild birds that look like they're sick, dead, or dying, those reports go through Department of Environmental Protection, Fish and Wildlife, or USDA Wildlife Services. I have that reporting information towards the end. If anyone has more, would like to discuss more, the contact information will be at the end of the slide. But we are continually monitoring the situation with highly pathogenic avian influenza. It is a foreign animal disease still and reportable. So that's why I say please do call us if you are finding you have sick or dying birds, particularly unexplained deaths of your of birds within your flock. We know that this disease can cause sudden death. Rapid onset, high mortality, so sort of all of a sudden in just a few days, lots of deaths in your birds. Wild birds can spread this disease without showing signs. However, we are seeing certainly wild birds can become sick from this disease as well. And since last year, we have seen that the disease was found in some livestock species, including dairy cattle, alpacas, goats, and pigs, and all sorts of wild mammals and beyond. So we're continuing to monitor the situation. The risk to humans right now is still considered low. Certainly CDC too is keeping a watch. We work real closely with our state level Department of Health and our state level Fish and Wildlife state veterinarian to kind of keep tabs of what's going on their end of things. Just so you've seen this information, what to keep an eye out for. Avian influenza can present in a lot of ways, but our big one is, just sudden illness, sudden unexplained deaths. You may see respiratory signs. You may see that sort of just ill, thrifty, not doing well bird. Drop in egg production is a big one. Drop in decrease of feed consumption. But truly, if you're not sure, please call us. We'll talk about it. Wild birds, if I didn't say it enough earlier on with sort of this idea of wild bird mitigation on your property, it's a big one, particularly with avian influenza. So these guys landing down on your property, having direct contact with your domestic poultry, or potentially your domestic poultry having contact with the secretions of the wild birds. That's unfortunately a huge route of transmission for this disease. So do all that you can to diminish that potential. Call us if you have any questions, if you have any issues going on with your flock. Our number there is 609-671-6400. I walked you through that process. Like I said, you'll talk to myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll see what might be going on and help you out with that. If you have a concern about any wild birds, there is the QR code for the online reporting form through DEP. And then Wildlife Services, so that's USDA Wildlife Services. Their number there is listed at the bottom of the screen. That agency is a great resource for if you're having an issue with wild birds on your property, other kinds of wild mammals, other kinds of wild animals on your property that you are getting having an issue with predation. Give them a call. They can walk you through some options, some of the do's and don'ts of rules of how you can try to detract these animals from causing harm to your flock. They're there to help you too. So Wildlife Services there at the bottom can be called for any assistance with wild bird or wild animal mitigation. Good biosecurity is so important for preventing any disease to your flock. More QR codes, my word. So Iowa State, I've mentioned before, lots of great information specifically for your disinfection protocols, if you're trying to figure out what to use. The next one there at the bottom is the Defend Your Flock site. That's USDA's specific website geared towards folks like you who own backyard flocks and want to learn more about protecting them. Lots of great information there. That's the one that's got the little chick icon next to it. USDA also has a good suite of resources for wildlife management through their wildlife services program. So that's the QR code there in the middle. If you've got more of a mixed species farm, so you've got poultry and horses and cows and goats, oh my, that QR code there is for you. And just for your awareness' sake, New Jersey's state government has a HPAI specific bird flu website that they update frequently with any of the latest and greatest on what's going on with the disease, particularly with the state. So it's sort of a one-stop shop for information about the disease. I just will say it one more time. If you have any questions about your flock's health, any issues, you think you've got sick birds going on, please call us. There's our number. Our website's there. This is my last slide. So thanks so much for everyone's attention. And if there is time, I know I went a little long, but if there's time, we'll take questions. But please do call. If you have questions anytime, call that number and just ask to speak to Sandy, and I'll be happy to help. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sterlich. That was really informative, and I hope a lot of people will take you up on that offer to help. We have a few minutes for questions. I haven't seen anything come through, but we'll just all hang on and wait to see. You guys are typing away. Let you get that out. Okay, I see a question here. Dr. Sterlich and Dr. Smith, are you able to see the questions, or do you need me to read them?
I am not able to see it.
Okay. This one says, what is the air exchange rate for the coop ventilation? How often should the total area exchange the air per day?
That might be a better question for Dr. Striller, maybe?
Dr. Sterlich, are you there?
I shouldn't have unmuted myself. Yep. So it'll vary depending on the ambient temperature. So if it's, winter or summertime, I'd be interested to know how you're measuring this. I'm just kind of curious, but I think if you're in the cooler weather, you're going to aim for an air exchange, air change per hour in the lower numbers, somewhere closer to 6. And then if you're in the higher temps, you're going to go, if you're kind of in the summer climate, warmer temps, you're going to look for, a higher air exchange per hour, right? So higher ventilation, 10 or up kind of deal. I can certainly look up, a resource for you when I have a moment and provide that. And Dr. Ajizi, if you'd like to hold off on sending the slides, or we can do that at a later time, I can send more specific guidance.
Sure. Thank you.
But that's the general gist I can give for now. So sorry if it's not as specific as this requester has asked.
Yeah, we can definitely get you more information. If you want to email me, I'll put up my email in the chat. There's another question here. Oh, there's a couple more questions here. Lovely. Do Canada geese pose a bigger threat for avian influenza than any other kind of bird?
No, waterfowl we tend to worry a bit more about waterfowl to some degree. Well, the answer is no. We are aware that Canada geese, have been getting tested, in the last 4 years since this outbreak has started. It is certainly more routinely when calls about them looking sick or dying off. Waterfowl historically will carry the avian influenza virus, may not show signs, but still can spread it around, and then, give it to domestic poultry, and then the domestic poultry becomes sick. So in that regard, we worry about it. But in current times right now, no. We're seeing the disease in all varieties of birds, including different kinds of waterfowl, so different kinds of geese, ducks, etc.
Great. How do you condition, vent, and gleat?
I think this might be a question about vent gleat. And in my experience, a lot of people see some white material around the vent of their bird, and they immediately say it's vent gleat. It is relatively rare to have vent gleat. If you do have that condition, then giving your bird a little bit of a bath can help out. But I would say more commonly there is kind of a different problem, usually of renal dysfunction or gout, that is causing those white the white material that's actually urates to be kind of deposited around the feathers of the cloaca.
We have another question. How do you stop pecking on birds?
So that's it's a really good question. There's a lot of different ways to do that. A lot of different, you have to really find the cause of the pecking. A lot of the time it's due to some type of husbandry going on. If they've got too much light, they are too active. So you want to make sure that their coop, is a place to kind of relax and so that they can kind of go in there and it's a little bit dark and they can, just kind of they can go in there for sleep. You don't want to overcrowd them because they kind of get all antsy and start picking on each other. If it's if they're not getting enough nutrition, then they're kind of looking for um, some way to get nutrition, so they start picking on each other. And then also you know feather pecking and pecking on other birds is known to be a kind of redirected foraging behavior. So if you try to redirect that foraging behavior into environmental enrichment like toys or something else for them to kind of play with, it can kind of go a long way in decreasing pecking of other birds.
Great. Another question is, are more illnesses found in some parts of the state than others?
That is a great question, and I did not run the numbers on that. I don't know if Dr. Strelick would have a better, she's a better finger on the pulse for that because she's driving all over the state at all times.
I'll say no. I don't think we have that. I don't think we can say there's a trend. However, sort of anecdotally, I believe we have areas or counties where folks are more active in reporting or reaching out to us for whatever reason it may be. The department may be more effective in their outreach in certain areas. I'm not sure. I'd be interested in this group's opinion on that truly, but we tend to maybe have more submissions sometimes or more calls from certain areas than others, but I'm not sure that there's certainly no way that that's a assumption about truly more illnesses in any one area in the state.
I think I would agree.
Another question, is the outdoor condition rock and dirty bad for chickens?
I'm wondering does that mean rock and dirt?
Yeah, I'm guessing, yeah, if the outside has a lot of rocks and dirt, is that bad for chickens?
I think it depends what they're doing with it. It may be, and kind of depends on what you mean by bad for chickens. It's definitely very difficult to disinfect that if you do have disease on your farm. Some parasites are spread through earthworms, so any contact with earthworms can kind of transmit those protozoal parasites. So if that's what you have, then you got to kind of work with it. But it's better than some other options.
What should the property setback parameters be for residents who would like to raise chickens in their backyards in a suburban area?
And that's not a question the state can answer. We don't have any state specific guidelines or rules on that. Typically, if those kinds of questions are decided at the local level. So for that individual, I recommend you check in with your municipality and see if there's a local ordinance regarding that.
Great. Is it okay to offer fresh grass cuttings or other material to a contained flock, since wild birds may have been on that material, and how long would a disease live? Can material be dried or stored until it is safe to give them?
That is a great question. It really depends on what pathogen it is. I am
And
not
almost what
sure.
time of the year?
Yeah. I would just say maybe don't give fresh grass cuttings just because they can get a ventricular impaction from eating the grass. If that's kind of the only enrichment that they have, they may go at that pretty hard. If it's like straw or something, that might be a little bit better. They don't tend to chow down on that quite as much.
Why do they get bareness or rawness on their back?
That can be a lot of different causes. I would say the main cause of that is if you have a rooster and he is mating with one of the females more than uh, too much, then it can kind of give them it can kind of take the feathers off their back. So you might want to separate that female from where the roosters can get to them.
How many treats and scratches do you give daily?
Ooh, not too much, not too much. You want to watch their waistline a little bit.
I think a lot of backyard home chickens are pets, but does that mean they should be kept separate from other non-bird pets, such as friendly dogs and cats?
I would. Um, dogs, even friendly dogs and cats can sometimes attack chickens, and then diseases can be spread. If you were to get avian influenza in your chickens and then they spread it to the dog or cat, then that's an even closer kind of way to possibly bring it into the home. And if the kids spend a lot of time with the dogs or cats, then um, you know you're just kind of making more routes to human infection, possibly.
Or if you have an outdoor cat, they could be hunting wild birds, getting exposed and bringing it to your birds.
Absolutely.
Next question is, how old do they stop producing eggs?
Depends on the breed. Um, I believe many start to slow down around 2 years. I've seen them still producing eggs at 7 years old. Not quite as much, and very low quality eggs. But that's 100% dependent on the breed.
And then the last two questions, there's one, is alpha good for them? I'm not sure what that is. And then there's a question about, is there too much mealworm to give hens? I'm guessing alpha is some kind of supplement.
Yeah, I'm not sure what alpha is. Yes, there is too many mealworms. Mealworms are pretty high in fat. So those too many of them can kind of predispose to hepatic lipidosis or fatty liver.
So mealworm should be considered a treat, I guess is the question.
I would say so. Yeah, you don't want to be
Yeah.
giving them mealworms, with every meal or really every day. You want to kind of keep the mealworms as a special little occasion. I wish I could eat cake every day, but I only eat it every once in a while.
I agree. And I think we'll do one more question, and then we'll end it. And of course, as Dr. Sterlich mentioned, you can always give them a call. So the last question we have here: if they stop producing eggs, what can you do with them?
So, if they're your backyard birds, you no longer want to keep them. There are 3 poultry auctions in the state. If that is one option for unloading them, if that directly answers that question. There's no reason why you can't keep the bird either. Um,
And then somebody wrote that the person might have meant alfalfa. Was it a question about is alfalfa good for them, I guess?
Wouldn't say it's good for them. Might be something that they can kind of forage in for treats, or might be okay for putting on the ground for them to kind of pick through.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming and learning about poultry health. And thank you to our speakers, Dr. Sterlich, Dr. Smith, and hopefully everyone learned something tonight. I certainly did. Thank you again, and a recording will be emailed to everyone who registered for this event. So if you missed something, or if you want to see something again, some of the resources that were shared, those will be emailed. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
See ya. Thanks.